Please don't let my baby die." The words shattered into the cold night air as Emily Parker pushed through the sliding glass doors of St. Matthew Medical Center, her voice trembling under the weight of pure fear. Outside, rain hammered the pavement like thousands of tiny fists. Red and blue reflections from emergency vehicles danced across the soaked parking lot. Inside, fluorescent lights washed the lobby in a pale glow, exposing every worried face, every hurried step, every silent prayer. Emily barely noticed any of it. All she could see was her 18-month-old son cradled tightly against her chest. Lucas felt far too warm in her arms. His tiny body trembled weakly beneath a dinosaur-print blanket soaked from the storm. His golden hair clung to his forehead. His eyes, usually bright and curious, struggled to stay open. The young mother stumbled toward the reception desk, her sneakers squeaking across the polished floor. "Please," she whispered again, this time almost unable to speak. "Help him." A nurse immediately rushed forward. Questions came quickly. How long had he been sick? Was he breathing normally? Did he have allergies? Emily tried to answer, but the words tangled together. Panic had a way of turning thoughts into static. Only 2 hours earlier, everything had seemed normal. Lucas had been laughing on the living room floor, stacking colorful plastic blocks while cartoons played softly in the background. Then came the fever. Fast, aggressive, unforgiving. One moment he was smiling. The next he was barely responsive. Emily had grabbed her keys, wrapped him in a blanket, and driven through pouring rain with one hand gripping the steering wheel and the other reaching back every few seconds to touch her son's leg, just to make sure he was still moving. The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos. Stretchers rolled past. Phones rang. Monitors beeped from distant hallways. Families sat in clusters of uncertainty, waiting for answers that never seemed to come quickly enough. Yet for Emily, the entire world had narrowed to one small boy fighting to keep his eyes open. She followed the nurses as they rushed Lucas through a set of double doors. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Every second felt heavier than the last. Emily Parker was 28 years old, but tonight she looked older. Life had taught her lessons most people spend decades avoiding. She had learned how to stretch every dollar, how to smile when she wanted to cry, how to carry responsibilities meant for two people. Since Lucas's father had left before his first birthday, Emily had become everything at once. Mother, provider, protector, comfort. She worked long shifts at a neighborhood diner outside downtown Chicago. Some weeks, she barely slept. Some months, she barely paid the bills. But every sacrifice felt worth it whenever Lucas wrapped his tiny arms around her neck and called her mommy. That one word made every struggle easier to bear. Tonight, however, something was different. Tonight, love alone didn't feel like enough. A nurse gently guided her toward a waiting area outside the treatment rooms. "The doctors are evaluating him now," she said kindly. "We'll update you as soon as we know more." Emily nodded, though her knees felt weak. She lowered herself into a plastic chair and clasped her trembling hands together. Around her, strangers stared at their phones, drank stale coffee, or silently watched television screens mounted on the walls. Time seemed frozen. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Every minute felt like an hour. Then something unexpected happened. Activity suddenly shifted across the emergency department. Conversations quieted. Several staff members moved with unusual purpose. Heads turned. Doors opened. A tall man wearing a white physician's coat stepped into the corridor. His presence didn't demand attention. It simply earned it. Calm eyes. Steady posture. Quiet confidence. The kind that only comes from carrying impossible responsibilities for years. Nurses straightened as he passed. Residents followed closely behind, listening carefully to every word. Emily had never seen him before. She had no idea that the man walking toward the treatment rooms was Dr. Nathaniel Royce. She had no idea he was one of the most respected physicians in America. And she certainly had no idea that before the night was over, his decision to stop and look into one little boy's case would change both of their lives forever. Dr. Nathaniel Royce moved through the emergency room with deliberate precision, his eyes scanning monitors, checking vital signs, and issuing calm, clear instructions to every nurse and resident in the vicinity. Emily Parker followed close behind, her heart hammering in her chest, her palms sweaty, and her mind racing with questions she could not articulate. Lucas lay on the stretcher, swaddled in blankets that did little to soothe the heat radiating from his small body. The fluorescent lights above created a sterile glare that reflected in the anxious eyes of Emily, but Dr. Royce's presence seemed to cut through the tension like a warm current. He crouched beside Lucas, placing a steady hand on the boy's chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat, the faint rise and fall of his tiny shoulders. "We are going to keep him stable," he said softly, his voice firm yet reassuring. Emily felt her shoulders relax slightly, the first time in what felt like an eternity that a shred of hope had found its way through the panic. Dr. Royce guided the staff in adjusting oxygen levels, checking for hydration, and maintaining a controlled environment. The sounds of the emergency room, once a chaotic symphony of beeps, calls, and shuffling feet, now seemed orchestrated, each movement precise, each instruction purposeful. Emily watched as he leaned closer to her son, whispering details to the nurses while maintaining a connection with her through brief, calm glances. "Mom, I need you to stay here and watch him," he instructed gently, not demanding, not scolding, simply guiding her presence in the room. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes, feeling both helpless and strangely empowered by his confidence. Time seemed to stretch and compress in ways that defied the clock. Emily could hear the distant wail of other patients, the soft clatter of carts being wheeled down hallways, but she was anchored in this singular moment, witnessing the extraordinary focus of a man who could have been anywhere, doing anything, yet had chosen to be fully present for her child. Dr. Royce reviewed Lucas's chart, cross-checking with a tablet in his hand, noting every symptom, every medication, every past entry meticulously. He conferred briefly with another doctor, then returned to Lucas's side, explaining each step in a language that Emily could understand without feeling patronized. "We are monitoring his temperature, ensuring his airway remains clear, and preparing to run tests to determine the cause of this fever," he said, his voice low and steady, offering more than instruction, offering calm. Emily felt her racing heart begin to slow, her fear still present but tempered by trust. The nurses moved with synchronized efficiency under his direction, drawing blood, taking readings, and adjusting equipment while Emily remained by the side of the stretcher, holding Lucas's hand, murmuring soft words to him as she watched his tiny chest rise and fall with each careful breath. Minutes passed with a rhythm that felt measured, deliberate, and intentional. Dr. Royce's presence was a quiet storm of competence and reassurance, a contrast to the earlier chaos, a living anchor for both mother and child. Emily realized that in this room, in this moment, she was witnessing more than medical expertise. She was witnessing the embodiment of calm under pressure, the quiet courage of a man who used his power not to dominate, but to protect. Her mind, which had been spinning with fear and doubt, began to grasp the depth of what it meant to be cared for in the most critical moments. The sterile walls of the emergency room faded into the background as she focused entirely on the precision of Dr. Royce's hands, the clarity of his instructions, and the serenity he brought into a world that had moments before felt unbearably overwhelming. Every decision, every touch, every word he spoke built a web of security around Lucas, and Emily found herself breathing more evenly, holding hope as a tangible presence. She leaned closer to her son, her hand lightly resting on his arm, and allowed herself for the first time to believe that he would be all right. The room, once a theater of panic and fear, had transformed into a space of controlled intent, of focus, of life-saving precision, all guided by the calm, unwavering hands and heart of Dr. Nathaniel Royce. Emily Parker sat in the small waiting area just outside the treatment rooms, her hands clasped tightly around her knees as she tried to regulate her breathing. Every beep from the monitors inside seemed amplified, a reminder of how fragile her son's condition was. Dr. Nathaniel Royce had returned her gaze briefly with a calm nod, acknowledging her presence without breaking his focus on Lucas. The minutes stretched as if time itself were holding its breath. Emily's mind drifted to the past few months, the countless late nights balancing work and motherhood, the tiny victories that often went unnoticed, the whispered fears she kept hidden even from her closest friends. The weight of all those moments now collided with the urgency of this night, and yet Dr. Royce's serene presence anchored her, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions inside her chest. Nurses moved efficiently around the room, drawing vials of blood and noting vitals, but all attention seemed to pivot around the doctor's quiet authority. He crouched again by Lucas's side, speaking softly to the staff, directing adjustments in oxygen and hydration, yet never rushing, never showing a trace of panic. Emily leaned closer to Lucas, brushing damp hair from his forehead, whispering encouragement, feeling the warmth of his tiny hand grasp her finger. Dr. Royce noticed and smiled faintly, a gesture that conveyed both acknowledgement and reassurance, as if saying she was not alone in this moment. A resident approached with a question about a dosage, and Nathaniel answered with precision, explaining the rationale in terms that Emily could comprehend, giving her insight without overwhelming her. The atmosphere, once tense with uncertainty, now hummed with purpose and rhythm. Emily could feel the tension in her body gradually ease as she watched the coordinated care unfold. Every movement, every instruction, every careful glance from the doctor reassured her that Lucas was in hands that were not only skilled but intentional, that the right decisions were being made without delay or hesitation. Outside, the rain continued to patter against the windows, but inside, the space felt insulated from fear, filled instead with controlled energy and the subtle hum of life being preserved. Emily's thoughts wandered briefly to the possibilities had she arrived even moments later, and shivers of gratitude ran through her. Dr. Royce's voice broke through again, calm yet commanding, guiding a nurse in preparing a treatment plan and explaining to Emily in a tone that was gentle, measured, and understanding. We are monitoring every vital, keeping him comfortable, and adjusting as needed. You are doing perfectly by staying calm with him. The words, simple yet profound, resonated through her chest, and she allowed herself to exhale fully, feeling some of the invisible weight lift from her shoulders. Minutes ticked by with steady precision. Lucas's breathing stabilized, his eyelids fluttered, and his tiny fingers relaxed around Emily's hand. The doctor's hands moved with an elegant efficiency, adjusting, checking, and ensuring every detail was attended to, and Emily felt a growing sense of trust, a recognition that this was not a moment of luck, but of deliberate care and mastery. The room, bright under the harsh yet clear hospital lights, held a palpable calm, punctuated by the soft sounds of treatment equipment and quiet directions. Emily's gaze shifted between Lucas and Dr. Royce, an unspoken bond forming in that charged silence, a blend of gratitude, relief, and awe. She watched as he spoke briefly to another nurse, then returned to Lucas, giving Emily a reassuring look that seemed to promise continuity, presence, and unwavering attention. She realized that this night, heavy with fear just moments ago, had transformed into an experience of connection, of witnessing skill, patience, and care intersecting to protect the most vulnerable. The fear had not vanished, but it was tempered now by hope, and Emily clung to that fragile yet growing thread, knowing that she was witnessing something extraordinary unfold in real time, a combination of human expertise, empathy, and calm that held her son's life steady against the storm. Emily Parker felt the tension in her chest begin to ebb ever so slightly as Dr. Nathaniel Royce continued his meticulous work beside Lucas. Every subtle adjustment he made, every quiet instruction to the staff, carried a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the pulse of the emergency room itself. Emily noticed the way he maintained eye contact with her occasionally, a silent reassurance that he saw not only her son, but her fear and her courage as well. Lucas's small hand twitched in response to the oxygen mask being carefully positioned, and Emily instinctively reached out, brushing her fingers over his arm, a gesture of connection and comfort that he responded to with a soft, fragile squeeze. The hum of medical equipment, once a source of anxiety, now provided a background to the delicate dance of care unfolding in the room. Dr. Royce moved with a calm precision, double-checking monitors, consulting charts, and guiding the nurses with the quiet authority of experience. Emily took note of each step, absorbing the methodical way he handled the situation, and she felt a sense of trust beginning to solidify, a fragile but growing belief that her son was safe in these hands. Minutes passed with a hypnotic cadence, each one reinforcing the delicate balance between vigilance and reassurance. Dr. Royce's voice, calm and deliberate, offered explanations in measured tones, describing each adjustment and each observation so Emily could follow without becoming overwhelmed. She marveled at the clarity of his communication, the way he transformed an otherwise intimidating environment into a space where understanding and control coexisted. Outside the treatment room, the rain continued to fall, the steady patter against the windows a reminder of the chaos from which they had escaped. Yet inside, the room felt insulated, a cocoon of focus and expertise. Emily's mind drifted to the countless times she had worried for Lucas in the past, the nights spent awake listening for a cough or a movement, the moments of helplessness that had punctuated her days. All of that experience now converged with this singular event, heightened by the presence of a doctor whose skill and composure turned fear into measured hope. Dr. Royce bent down to adjust Lucas's blanket and murmured a few words to him, a gentle reassurance that seemed to flow through Emily as well. The staff moved with the seamless coordination of a well-rehearsed team, each member aware of their role, yet responsive to the slightest change in the boy's condition. Emily felt a wave of gratitude, an emotional swell that mingled with lingering anxiety, a recognition that even in the face of fear, competence and empathy could provide sanctuary. Dr. Royce turned briefly to Emily, offering a small, comforting smile, and she understood that his calm was not indifference, but a carefully maintained clarity designed to protect and guide. The moments stretched, each heartbeat of Lucas echoing in Emily's chest as she watched the doctor check monitors, adjust tubing, and confer with the nurses. The fluorescent light reflected softly off polished surfaces, the sterile smell of disinfectant mingling with the faint aroma of antiseptic solutions, and every detail seemed imbued with purpose. Emily's fear was still present, but tempered now by trust and the steady reassurance that came from observing deliberate, expert action. She whispered softly to Lucas, telling him that he was safe, that he was strong, and that they were together, and his hand twitched again, a fragile signal that he could hear, that he could feel, that he was responding. Dr. Royce continued to work with the patience of someone who had seen countless emergencies yet never allowed the weight of responsibility to cloud his clarity. Emily marveled at the combination of skill, empathy, and calm that seemed to radiate from him, creating an invisible shield around her son. She realized that in this moment, hope was tangible, carried on the steady hands and calm heart of a man devoted to protecting life, and she felt a profound, quiet relief settle over her as Lucas's breathing became more even, his small chest rising and falling with the measured rhythm of safety restored, if only gradually, but undeniably. Nearly an hour had passed since Emily Parker rushed through the emergency room doors, yet the memory of that desperate sprint still lingered in her body like an echo. Her muscles ached from tension, her eyes burned from exhaustion, but for the first time that night, she noticed something she had been too afraid to look for before. Lucas was no longer struggling to keep his eyes open. He was sleeping, not the restless, uncomfortable kind of sleep that comes with distress, but a deeper, calmer rest. The sight nearly brought fresh tears to Emily's eyes. She sat beside the stretcher, gently brushing her fingers through her son's soft blonde hair. The monitor beside him displayed steady numbers, and each rhythmic tone felt like a small victory. Across the room, Dr. Nathaniel Royce reviewed a series of test results that had just arrived. His expression remained composed, but his eyes moved carefully across every detail. He was not a man who rushed conclusions. He studied patterns. He noticed small things others missed. That habit had helped build not only his medical reputation, but also the healthcare empire that had made him one of the wealthiest physicians in the country. Yet standing inside that treatment room, none of that seemed to matter. There were no headlines. No board meetings. No investors. There was only a little boy and a worried mother. One of the nurses approached quietly and handed him another report. Nathaniel reviewed it, then looked toward Lucas. Something caught his attention. Not a dramatic discovery. Not an emergency. Just a subtle detail that did not fit perfectly with the rest of the picture. His gaze shifted toward Emily. "Mrs. Parker," he said gently. Emily immediately stood. Her heart skipped. Even after all the reassurance, fear still lived inside every parent during moments like these. Nathaniel noticed the reaction instantly. "Nothing is wrong," he said calmly. I just have a few questions. Emily nodded. He pulled up a chair and sat across from her. Unlike many people in positions of power, he never spoke down to others. He maintained eye contact. He listened carefully. He gave people space to answer. Has Lucas been around anyone sick recently? He asked. Emily thought for a moment. Not that I know of. Any recent travel? No. New foods. New medications. She shook her head. Then she paused. Actually, Nathaniel leaned forward slightly. Hey, few days ago, he was at a birthday party. There were a lot of kids there. Nathaniel nodded slowly. And when did you first notice he was not feeling like himself? Emily thought back. The timeline suddenly seemed important. Every small detail felt significant now. As she described the past 48 hours, Nathaniel listened without interruption. Not once did he glance at his watch. Not once did he rush her. Emily found herself speaking more openly than she expected. She described the sleepless nights, the extra shifts at the diner, the challenges of raising Lucas alone, the constant balancing act between work, bills, daycare, and motherhood. Somehow, the conversation stopped feeling like a medical interview. It felt human. Nathaniel listened carefully. When she finished, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he offered a small smile. You are doing a remarkable job. Emily blinked. Of all the things she expected to hear that night, those words were not among them. For months, maybe years, she had measured herself against impossible standards. She worried about every mistake, every late bill, every rushed dinner, every moment she felt she was not enough. Yet hearing those simple words from someone she respected carried unexpected weight. Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. Nathaniel handed her a tissue without making a scene of it. Parents like you often forget something important, he said softly. Children do not need perfect parents. They need present ones. Emily lowered her gaze as emotion tightened her throat. For a moment, the fluorescent lights, the monitors, and the hospital walls seemed to disappear. She was simply a mother who had spent years fighting for her son. And somehow, a man who could have been anywhere else had taken the time to remind her that her efforts mattered. Just then, movement from the stretcher caught both of their attention. Lucas shifted beneath the blanket. His small eyes slowly opened. Confused. Sleepy. But awake. Emily's breath caught instantly. Mommy, he whispered. The single word transformed the room. Relief swept across her face so quickly it was almost visible. Nathaniel rose from his chair and stepped closer, carefully checking Lucas's condition while Emily held her son's tiny hand. Outside, the rain had finally begun to slow. Inside, hope had just grown stronger. Emily Parker felt a warmth spread through her chest as Lucas blinked his small eyes open and murmured softly, searching for her presence. She leaned closer, brushing a loose strand of blonde hair from his forehead, her thumb tracing the faint warmth of his skin. The monitors continued their rhythmic beeping, steady and reassuring, and Emily could feel the tension that had gripped her shoulders for hours begin to loosen just slightly. Dr. Nathaniel Royce remained nearby, adjusting the oxygen mask with a calm precision, his every movement deliberate yet unobtrusive, allowing Emily to maintain her connection with Lucas without feeling excluded from his care. He glanced at her once, offering a quiet nod of encouragement, and she realized that in the span of minutes, her fear had begun to transform into gratitude and trust. The nurses moved around the room with an orchestrated fluidity, carrying out instructions without hesitation. Their earlier hurried energy now channeled into a controlled, purposeful rhythm that filled the room with a sense of safety. Emily noticed the smallest details, the careful placement of the blankets, the gentle check of Lucas's pulse, the way Dr. Royce's calm voice seemed to soothe not only her son, but the entire room. She whispered softly to Lucas, telling him that he was safe, that she was there, that they were together, and he responded with a faint but deliberate squeeze of her finger. Nathaniel took a step back, observing the boy and his mother with measured attention, then gently spoke. He is stabilizing. We will continue monitoring him closely, but he is responding well. Emily felt her throat tighten, a mixture of relief and lingering fear, realizing how fragile hope could feel when it had been absent for so long. She watched as Dr. Royce explained the next steps to the staff, each instruction precise, each observation accounted for, all delivered in a voice that was firm but infused with empathy. The steady cadence of his guidance created a rhythm that Emily could anchor herself to, a reassurance that someone with both experience and care was fully present. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, tapping gently against the windows, a quiet reminder of the storm they had left behind, while inside, a different kind of calm had taken hold, built from human skill, attentiveness, and understanding. Emily reflected on the past hours, the fear, the frantic drive through the rain, the moments where panic had threatened to overwhelm her, and she realized that the presence of someone capable, focused, and patient had shifted the trajectory of the night entirely. Lucas stirred slightly, his small eyes fluttering, and she felt her hand tighten around his in a protective, yet trusting grip. Nathaniel's attention remained on the monitors and her son, but he occasionally looked toward Emily, silently communicating reassurance and shared focus, a reminder that she was not alone in this crucial moment. The fluorescent lights overhead reflected softly off polished surfaces, casting the room in a stark clarity, yet it felt almost intimate, a sanctuary built from deliberate care. Emily's thoughts wandered to the countless nights she had spent worried over minor fevers or sleepless hours, and she recognized now that those fears, though real, had prepared her to be present in the ways that mattered most. Dr. Royce continued his careful oversight, adjusting the readings, consulting quietly with the team, all while allowing Emily to remain at her son's side, offering comfort and love in tandem with medical expertise. Every subtle shift, every careful word, every measured motion reinforced a sense of safety and progress, a combination of human attentiveness and technical skill that had transformed the room into a space of hope. Emily Parker leaned closer, resting her forehead lightly against Lucas's soft hair, inhaling the faint scent of baby lotion mixed with the sterile air of the emergency room, and felt a deep, steadying calm take hold, the culmination of fear, trust, and relief converging into a quiet, unwavering presence that promised the night was no longer defined by uncertainty, but by care, connection, and the slow but certain return of stability. The clock on the wall quietly passed midnight, but inside the emergency department, time seemed to move differently. The sharp edge of fear that had dominated the night was gradually giving way to something softer, something steadier. Lucas rested comfortably beneath the blanket, his breathing now even and predictable. The color had returned to his cheeks, and every few minutes his eyes would flutter open before drifting back into peaceful sleep. Emily Parker remained seated beside him, unwilling to move farther than an arm's length away. She knew she should probably rest. She knew her body was exhausted. But after everything that had happened, simply watching her son sleep felt like the greatest gift imaginable. Across the room, Dr. Nathaniel Royce reviewed the latest updates on a tablet while speaking quietly with two nurses. The conversation was brief, efficient, professional. Yet even from a distance, Emily noticed something unusual. The staff genuinely respected him, not because of his wealth, not because of his reputation. They respected him because he respected them. Every nurse received his full attention. Every question was answered thoughtfully. Every contribution was acknowledged. There was no arrogance in his leadership, only competence. As the nurses returned to their duties, Nathaniel walked back toward Lucas's bedside. He checked the monitor one more time before looking at Emily. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Emily almost laughed at the question, not because it was funny, but because nobody had asked her that all night. Everyone had focused on Lucas, as they should have. Yet somehow Nathaniel remembered there was another person struggling through this experience. "I am better now," she admitted softly. "I think it is finally starting to feel real." Nathaniel nodded. He understood exactly what she meant. There was a certain emotional delay that often came after intense moments. Fear arrived immediately. Relief arrived later, sometimes much later. Emily looked down at her hands. The adrenaline had faded enough for her to notice how tired she truly was. Her fingers trembled slightly. Her shoulders felt heavy. She had not eaten since early afternoon. Nathaniel noticed. He seemed to notice everything. Without making a production of it, he quietly stepped outside the room. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a bottle of water and a small hospital meal tray. Emily looked surprised. "You did not have to do that." Nathaniel placed the items on a nearby table. "Actually, I did," he said with a faint smile. "You cannot take care of him if you do not take care of yourself." The simple statement struck Emily harder than she expected. For years she had placed herself last. Bills came first. Work came first. Lucas came first. Somewhere along the way, she had forgotten that survival required caring for herself too. She looked away briefly, blinking back emotion. Nathaniel pretended not to notice, giving her the dignity of privacy. Lucas stirred again. This time he opened his eyes fully. "Mommy." Emily immediately leaned forward. "I am right here, sweetheart." Lucas looked around the room with sleepy confusion. "Did I fall asleep?" Emily smiled through tears. "A little." The toddler considered this information carefully before asking the question only a child would ask after an emergency room visit. "Can we go home now?" Emily laughed softly. The sound surprised even her. It was the first genuine laugh she had managed all night. Nathaniel chuckled as well. "Soon, buddy," he said. "You need a little more rest first." Lucas accepted the answer without argument and immediately closed his eyes again. The room grew quiet. Not an uncomfortable silence. A peaceful one. The kind of silence that follows a storm after the clouds begin to clear. Emily watched Nathaniel as he completed another chart update. She had seen countless successful people on television and social media. Wealthy executives. Influential figures. People who measured success in numbers and accomplishments. Yet sitting here tonight, she realized something important. Real power looked different. Real power was staying calm when others panicked. Real power was using knowledge to protect rather than impress. Real power was choosing compassion when nobody expected it. Nathaniel finally finished his notes and placed the tablet aside. Through the large windows at the end of the corridor, the first hints of early morning light began to appear beyond the fading rain clouds. The longest night of Emily Parker's life was slowly coming to an end. Neither of them knew it yet, but the conversation they were about to have before sunrise would change far more than this single night. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the tall hospital windows, painting pale gold streaks across the polished floor. The storm that had dominated the night was finally gone. In its place came a quiet stillness, the kind that arrives after hours of uncertainty finally begin to settle. Lucas was awake now, propped up slightly in his hospital bed, sipping small amounts of water and occasionally asking questions that only a curious toddler could think of. Emily Parker sat beside him, looking noticeably different than she had just a few hours earlier. The fear had not completely disappeared, but it no longer controlled her. Relief had begun replacing panic. Hope had begun replacing dread. Across the room, Dr. Nathaniel Royce reviewed the final updates from the overnight team. The latest results confirmed what he had cautiously hoped to see. Lucas was responding well. His condition had improved steadily throughout the night, and barring any unexpected complications, he would likely be able to leave the hospital later that day. When Nathaniel shared the news, Emily covered her mouth with both hands. For a moment she could not speak. The words felt too large to process. She simply nodded while tears gathered in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Nathaniel offered a small smile. "Your son did the hard part." Emily shook her head. "No, you did not have to stay. Someone like you could have handed the case to someone else." Nathaniel looked toward Lucas before answering. "Someone like me became a doctor for moments exactly like this." The answer stayed with Emily. There was no ego behind it. No attempt to impress her. Just simple truth. A nurse entered carrying discharge paperwork that would eventually need signatures and instructions, but there was no rush. The atmosphere had changed. Completely. What had begun as an emergency now felt like recovery. While Lucas became fascinated by the stickers a nurse had given him, Emily and Nathaniel found themselves talking for the first time without medical urgency, hanging over every word. Nathaniel asked about her job at the diner. Emily talked about balancing shifts, daycare costs, rent, and the constant challenges of raising a child alone. She did not complain. She simply explained reality. Nathaniel listened carefully, much like he had listened throughout the night. The more he listened, the more he admired her resilience. There was a quiet strength in Emily Parker, the kind that rarely appeared in headlines, the kind that woke up before dawn, worked double shifts, and still found enough energy to read bedtime stories at night. At one point, Lucas pointed toward Nathaniel and smiled. "Mommy, is he the superhero doctor?" The question caused both adults to laugh. Nathaniel crouched beside the bed. "I think superheroes wear capes." Lucas considered this very seriously. "You have a white cape." Nathaniel glanced down at his physician's coat and laughed again. Even several nurses nearby smiled. The simple exchange brightened the room. Yet what happened next was something nobody expected. One of the younger nurses approached Nathaniel carrying a phone. "Dr. Royce," she said quietly, "I think you should see this." Nathaniel looked confused. The nurse turned the screen toward him. During the height of the emergency the previous night, another family member waiting nearby had recorded a short video. Nothing dramatic. Nothing sensational. Just a brief clip showing Nathaniel kneeling beside Lucas's bed while speaking calmly with Emily and coordinating care with the staff. Someone had shared the video online. Overnight, it had spread far beyond the hospital walls. Thousands of people had already viewed it. Hundreds of comments filled the screen. Many focused on the same thing. Not his wealth. Not his success. Not his business ventures. They were talking about kindness. About compassion. About the importance of staying present during difficult moments. Nathaniel looked uncomfortable with the attention. Emily, however, felt something entirely different. She scrolled through a few comments. Strangers from around the country were sharing stories about doctors, nurses, parents, and ordinary people who had changed lives simply by showing up when it mattered most. The video was no longer about one hospital visit. It had become something larger. A reminder that humanity still existed in unexpected places. Emily looked around the room. The nurses, the equipment, the morning sunlight, the little boy smiling beside her, and the doctor who had quietly chosen to stay when he could have walked away. For the first time since arriving at St. Matthew Medical Center, she fully understood something important. The most extraordinary people were often the ones who never needed recognition at all. By late morning, the emergency department looked completely different from the place Emily Parker had entered the night before. The harsh uncertainty had disappeared. Families came and went. Nurses moved through the hallways carrying charts and supplies. Phones rang. Doors opened and closed. Life continued in its endless rhythm. Yet for Emily, everything felt changed. Lucas sat upright in his bed now, happily placing colorful stickers across a paper cup, while occasionally showing his latest masterpiece to anyone willing to look. Every laugh from him felt like a miracle. Every smile felt like a gift she would never again take for granted. The discharge paperwork had been completed. The final evaluations were encouraging. Soon they would be heading home. A place that suddenly sounded more wonderful than any luxury destination in the world. Emily gathered their belongings slowly, almost reluctant to leave the room that had become a sanctuary during the most frightening night of her life. As she folded Lucas's small blanket, she glanced toward the hallway and noticed Dr. Nathaniel Royce speaking with several members of the hospital staff. Despite the attention surrounding him, despite the messages, calls, and growing online interest generated by the viral video, nothing about his behavior had changed. He remained focused on patients, focused on people, focused on the work itself. The nurse who had shown him the video earlier mentioned that several news organizations had already reached out for comments. Nathaniel politely declined every request. He had no interest in becoming the story. Emily found herself smiling at that. In a world where so many people chased recognition, the man who deserved it most seemed determined to avoid it. A short time later, Nathaniel returned to Lucas's room one final time. Lucas immediately brightened. "The superhero doctor is back." Nathaniel laughed and shook his head. "I thought we agreed I was just a regular doctor." Lucas pointed confidently toward the white coat. "Still looks like a cape." Emily laughed along with them. The simple joy in the room felt almost unreal compared to the fear that had once filled it. Nathaniel completed a final check and reviewed a few instructions with Emily. Nothing complicated. Rest, hydration, follow-up care. The practical steps that would help Lucas continue recovering. When he finished, there was a brief pause. One of those moments where words suddenly feel inadequate. Emily looked down before finally speaking. "I do not know how to thank you." Nathaniel's expression softened. "You already have." Emily looked confused. He glanced toward Lucas. "He is smiling. That is enough." For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence carried more meaning than any speech could have. Emily realized that the most valuable thing Nathaniel had given her was not simply medical care. It was peace during chaos, confidence during fear, hope when she felt powerless. Those things could not be measured on a bill or recorded in a chart. They existed in a different category entirely. Lucas suddenly reached for a crayon from the bedside table. With the intense concentration only children possess, he began drawing on a blank sheet of paper. Several minutes later, He proudly handed it to Nathaniel. The drawing was simple. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. One figure wore a large white coat that looked suspiciously like a superhero cape. Nathaniel studied the picture for a second before carefully folding it and placing it inside his pocket. "I think this belongs in my office," he said. Lucas grinned. Emily felt tears gather once more, but this time they came from gratitude rather than fear. A nurse arrived with a wheelchair for discharge, and the moment everyone knew was coming had finally arrived. Emily picked up her bag. Lucas waved enthusiastically from the chair. Nathaniel walked them toward the exit. As the automatic doors opened, warm sunlight spilled across the floor. The storm clouds were gone. The sky stretched clear and blue above the city. Emily paused before stepping outside. She turned back one final time. Nathaniel remained standing near the entrance, already preparing to return to his responsibilities inside the hospital. Another patient, another family, another life that might need reassurance. Emily smiled. "Thank you, Dr. Royce." Nathaniel nodded. "Take care of each other." Then he disappeared back through the doors. Emily pushed Lucas forward into the sunshine. The night that had begun with fear ended with something far stronger. Not wealth, not status, not recognition, just humanity. Because sometimes the people who change our lives the most are not the ones who seek attention. They are the ones who quietly show up when everything is falling apart and stay until everything is okay again. And years later, Emily Parker would struggle to remember every detail of that frightening night. She would forget the sounds of the machines, the exact times on the clock, the words written on the paperwork. But she would never forget the calm doctor who chose compassion over convenience, presence over prestige, and kindness over recognition. Because true greatness is not measured by what a person owns. It is measured by what they give when someone else needs it most.